أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى عترة الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وسلم. أما بعد السلام عليكم everyone. Welcome to another episode of Real Talk. Today I have the honor of having Sajeda Panju with us, and she's kindly agreed to join us. Assalamu alaikum, Sajeda.
Alaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for agreeing. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm fine. Thank you. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, thank you. If I can ask you to just introduce yourself to the audience, please, to the viewers.
Sure. My name is Sajeda Karmali Panju. I am an American mama of 3 kids, living in London for the last 11 years, married to Munir Panju. And I'm here to talk to you about my experience having a special needs baby.
You have 3 children, you mentioned.
Yes,
and
correct.
One of them is a special needs baby. Do you want to tell us your kids and their names and a little bit about them?
Yeah. So I've got 3 kids, alhamdulillah. I've got a 7-year-old daughter, Zarina. I've got a 5-year-old son, Mahdi. And our last baby is 23-month-old Nuria Zainab.
Wow, mashallah, mashallah.
Yeah, and Nuria Zainab was our unexpected baby, in the sense that after having 2 kids who, alhamdulillah, we didn't really have to worry anything about, Nuria came to us with trisomy 21, which is also known as Down syndrome.
You knew this from the beginning of the pregnancy or midway, or not until she was born?
Yeah, so it's funny because a lot of people ask us, I think as Muslims, we don't usually go in for any extra testing or anything like that. So a lot of people ask me, did you know about Nuria during your pregnancy? And the short answer is yes. But the long answer is we knew, but we didn't expect to know, because we just did the same stuff that we did with our other kids in terms of the testing that they offer, etc. So yeah, it was revealed to us at our 12-week scan, for starters.
What was the first thing that went through your mind when you were told?
A few things. I think the first thing that went through my mind was check again. And I just keep telling her. I come from a science background, and so in my mind it was like, no, but you need to check again. Like, you need to, it was a measurement of the back of the neck, and they said that the average range. They gave me the average range, and I said, well, it's only slightly out of range. It's very likely. I was just kind of trying to talk to myself, really, and then kind of telling them that they need to check again, the ultrasonographer. And it did take a few hours, actually, more than the normal ultrasound appointment. So they had me walk around, come back, walk around, come back. It's about 3 or 4 hours where they completed the test, and they brought in the actual sonographer rather than the one that they had training to make sure. So you kind of have it in your mind that it's something serious, but you don't know exactly what it means for you. So yeah, they did that, and then they do what's called a combined screening in England at your 12 weeks. So they automatically do this combined screening unless you opt out of it. And as I said, with my other 2 kids, I just had it, and I just figured, well, I'll just have the same thing, not thinking that the outcome could be so severely different.
So this was in your 12-week scan?
That's right.
Your husband was with you?
Yes. Yeah, my husband is awesome. He comes with me to all my appointments, probably because he knows that if he didn't, he probably wouldn't hear the end of it. So
what was his reaction?
I can't remember. I think I was pretty much caught up in my own world at that point. He was with me. We were, he was hugging me, kind of like making sure that I was all right. After they do your ultrasound, they take you for a blood test, which kind of helps to narrowed down the chances, the odds of having a trisomy 21 baby. And after that, then they take you into a room for counseling. And so I just remember sitting there and, like he's asking a bunch of questions and I'm asking a bunch of questions. And unfortunately, this nurse, she was doing the best that she could to explain everything, but it felt from the get-go that it was, I don't know, it was being explained to us like very doom and gloomy from the get-go. And I remember that sort of being the main thing that stuck with me, especially in that appointment.
Do you want to explain that a little bit more, or what do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, so throughout our pregnancy, we would get questions, after about 16 weeks, we discovered Nuria was also having a fetal defect, a heart defect. And I think in many ways, getting this news was worse for me than finding out that my baby was high risk for Down syndrome. Heart defects come as part and parcel with many kids who are born with Down syndrome. And in my family, my eldest brother, Habib, we call him Marhum Habib or Marhum Ba, he was my parents' first child, and he was actually born with a severe congenital defect of the heart. He was born without a septum in his heart, and he only survived until the age of about 6 years old. So I think, for starters, where I got the news about Down syndrome was one thing. But where I found out about the heart defect, I couldn't sort of contain the tears. And it was just kind of like, this is too much and this is too close to home.
Yeah.
And throughout our pregnancy, when we would, have our scans and whatnot, they would continue to ask us at every appointment before beginning. They would say, so you've chosen to continue with the pregnancy. You know that your baby has got a hole in the heart, and this and that. They would basically rehash everything. And I found that up until the point where we were beginning to be seen by the UCLH team in central London, for the longest time when we were at Watford, it was quite like, like they would remind you of the fact that you were having a high risk, basically a difficult baby. But
Did
they
you feel pressured into terminating the pregnancy at all?
To some degree, yeah. And it was not knowing, anything beyond just this is a diagnosis, and this is the heart condition. And yeah, I think for the first 16 to 20 weeks, it was definitely something that we grappled with. We know what the rules surrounding our religion are. And after, a brief sort of interlude of considering even what it would mean if we didn't have this baby, or thinking that maybe God wouldn't actually allow it to come to fruition, it was a case of, what, actually, like, it's not enough of a reason to even consider it. Even if we put faith to one side, it just didn't seem right, to even think that this was anything but a blessing. But it took us a little while to get there, definitely.
So what helped you get there? What were the factors that sort of helped you to get it right in your mind?
So I think one thing that we used to see and never really pay attention to was the fact that there are so many children. I think 1 in 800 children are born with trisomy 21. It's one of the most common congenital conditions to be born with, or syndrome. It's not even considered really like a diagnosis in and of itself. Just the fact that this is what your child will have, this extra chromosome. And when we actually thought about it, when it came down to it, and we would sort of, do a bit of reading and speaking to other people, and we would see, now that your eyes were opened to it, my mother-in-law was on a flight to, I think, Karbala at the time. She was going for ziyarah, or something along those lines. Or she had, afterwards, she was going for ziyarah or something. But you know, like she saw this kid on the airplane come, just run straight to her, my mother-in-law, and give her a hug. This kid who had Down syndrome, and like she didn't realize if, you know, like there was something that she was exuding. Or my husband would see this family outside of where he worked in Covent Garden, you know, like a tourist family come with their 3 children, and one of them has got Down syndrome, and they're just bopping along, like doing the normal, you know, touristy family things. And I think that gave us the courage and the confidence to actually just slow down a little bit. And it was still mentally difficult, because it wasn't until my baby was born that we realized how perfect she was. But it was difficult, and it took us a while. But I think opening our eyes up a bit more really helped, definitely.
I suppose in a way it was like God sort of just showing you that, you know, this is how it's going to be, and it's fine, and don't stress about it.
Definitely. I'm a huge believer in signs, you know, that the universe will throw you signs.
Yeah.
And at the time, I think we had we had this goldfish. And while I was in Toronto, after I'd had my first scan, Munir calls me up and says, "Hey, look, our goldfish had 3 babies today." You know, and it was a random thing. We didn't even know our goldfish was even pregnant or anything like that. And yeah, she pops out with 3 kids one day, and Munir goes to me, like, maybe it's a sign, you know. So yeah, there was little things like that throughout the pregnancy that I think, even though it was very difficult, especially towards the beginning and middle, by the time she was born, I had certainly processed it. And I was expecting the worst. And when she came out, it was like, what was all the fuss about, you know?
So before we go into the actual her birth and afterwards, how, obviously once you and your husband found out, how did you tell your children, your extended family, your parents and parents-in-laws and extended family?
So we didn't actually tell our kids anything, but 2 days after my first scan, I was flying to Toronto. My family all live in Toronto, and I was I was flying with my other 2 kids on my own. And when I got there, you know, there was one day where I was in the basement with my mom, and we were just having a chat. And you know, I told her about it. First, I told my siblings, my brother and my sister, the older 2. And you know, they said to me, they're like, mom and dad, like they're your parents, like they love you. They're never gonna, you know, not want you to have all the support that they can possibly give you. So I just had to come out with it and just kind of say, look, this is a situation, and you know, I'm gonna need, you know, all the prayers and all the support that I can possibly have. And I did kind of expect a little bit of I want to say maybe like old-fashioned attitude. And my parents really surprised me. Not only did my parents surprise me, I think my entire family, you know, even my mother-in-law. You may or may not know, but she's a huge support for myself and Munir when it comes to our kids. She doesn't just look after them; she raises them. You know, I mean, they spend basically half their time at my mother. It was kind of like a joke, like, you know, we say like it's part of our marriage contract. You know, like my mother-in-law promised that she would help me with children. You know, and make it possible for me to do anything. And she says to me that she doesn't remember offering that, but I said to her, no, I very much remember you offering it. And so I said, I'll give you all the grandbabies you want, but you got to help me raise them. And she really has, to her credit, she's not only, you know, helped, she's taken on a big, like they say it takes a village, like her and my husband and me, like that's our village, you know? So I was very lucky, alhamdulillah, to tell my parents and to tell, you know, my husband's parents, and then slowly disseminated to the rest of the family, you know, in time, really. We never really kept anything, as it were, from them. We just told them how it was. And yeah, we've been very lucky.
One of the things that you said was you've got sort of a science background, so obviously you know how it works and everything, but those people who don't have a science background and are quite traditional and way of thinking and everything, and I'm not saying that miracles don't happen, but there's this concept of, oh, if we pray hard enough and we do enough du'as, then, you know, it'll all be okay. Did you face a lot of that? And then was that there sort of that expectation of, you know, it's going to be all okay, and then that sort of heartbreak when it's not, or, you know, what you perceive as not being okay, sort of thing? How did that play out? Because again, you know, du'as are very, very powerful. Obviously, there's no doubt about that, but there's a difference well, I don't know. I suppose miracles can happen through du'as. I'm just wondering how that played out in your
Yeah,
story.
I think the very fact that I don't know whether this is the right thing to say or not, but sometimes Munir and I, we would say to each other, it looks like we got Down syndrome light, as in like our baby was, she was born looking like she has Down syndrome, but she doesn't really act it, I mean, she's limited by certain physical limitations, like, low muscle tone, for example. But cognitively, even though she might be developmentally slower than other children, we just never noticed it. I think we raised her and have been trying to raise her just the same as our other children. And I think any baby to me is a miracle, because I know several people who are unable to even have babies. And I think that, yes, we do. Like my mom would, for example, she might pray and she might do du'as and say, like let's pray that this kind of um, gets removed, something along those lines. And we would have to like say to her, mom, like as long as you understand that this is something that's in her genetic makeup, this is in her DNA. It's not going to disappear, but definitely, like we would never stop anyone, or ourselves even. We would never stop praying that Maria had a similar quality of life to our other children. So that's all you want as a parent, is to be able to give your child everything, and I think whether or not she had the capabilities that she has, she's very much a miracle. Just the fact that she, came out in one piece, 10 fingers, 10 toes, all of her organs intact. They always say, when you're comparing yourself to others, always look at others who have less than you. And, we spend a lot of time at Great Ormond Street, and that's a place that you definitely, Great Ormond Street Hospital, that's a place where you definitely see people who are in a much worse, and I use the word worse in quotations, but worse off position. And that's when you genuinely feel like you kind of dodged a bullet, So yeah, I think, definitely she's our miracle baby for sure.
Alhamdulillah. So you mentioned that you spent a lot of time in hospital with Nuri. Do you want to tell us the impact of that on your family, on your children, on your husband, and on yourself as well, obviously?
Absolutely. I mean, as I said, my parents live in Toronto, but they come over whenever they can, especially, if there's a baby being born, or, if certain months have passed, this year being the exception, they'll come and, spend time with their grandchildren here, but also like will want us to go over to that side. But the majority of the time we're here and they're there. And so the only people who are there to look after the children as a collective is, again, myself, my husband, and my mother-in-law. And, we couldn't have done any of this without Munir's mom being such a crucial caregiver. And so like when we have appointments, in the hospital, or when we'd have specialist appointments, like she's our first port of call. And she also works full time, and she's, if she would have to take time off, then she would have to stay with the other two children while we go on these hospital missions. And last year, Nuria had 2 open heart surgeries, one at the age of 3 months and one at the age of 10 months. And the first open heart surgery was actually an emergency one. So we knew she would need a surgery at some point. But because she became ill with bronchiolitis, and, at that stage, they're so young that you can't really do a full repair of what's called a VSD, which is what she had. Then, they have to do an intermediate procedure to basically allow the lungs to dry out from the wetness of the bronchiolitis, which is what causes breathing problems, and the babies go pale and blue and things like that. So that time, in fact, that's when my mother-in-law had gone for ziyara, and it was like the one time where she actually traveled. She's like always around usually, and like literally the one time she traveled and did something for herself, and that's the time when we ended up in the hospital. And it was difficult, not only because we didn't have Dadi to support us, and she, I think, just like rushed back from whatever airport she could get a plane from just to be with us. And I think being in the hospital was not just a time, I guess, burden, like just being there all the time and not knowing anything, but also psychologically, to a point where you kind of, I mean, for me, like I was mainly with Nuria and Munir and Daddy were mainly with the other kids. So even when we were at the hospitals, it was at the end of the night, like it would be me there. And especially at Great Ormond Street in London, like I would stay there near the hospital. And so at nights and stuff, I'd be on my own, sometimes with the baby, going back to the apartment on my own, and just a lot of sort of alone time to think, and sometimes not the best thoughts at all, because you're seeing your child there, all wired up and beeping and alarms and whatever. And someone who comes from a healthcare background, I find hospitals to be a very comforting place, but when it's your own kid, it's different.
Can I just stop you here for a minute? Because I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from some of the stuff that you're saying, even for those of us who've not experienced what you've experienced. So I think one of the things that you said, which I thought was really, really beautiful, was the fact that your mother-in-law was going to Ziara, and she sort of cut her trip short in order to come back to help you. I think that's
basically just finished off as quickly as she could, whatever. I can't remember exactly where they were at that point. But it was, in fact, my dad had also gone for a ziyarah at the same time, and they were at the Zuri together and doing hajat together while their joint grandbaby was in the hospital. Yeah, and yeah, she did. She definitely, like, the first thing she did when she got back from the airport to come straight to Watford General and bring us the water from Hazrat Abbas.
That's beautiful. I think, some of the times I think we get so caught up on the actual sort of the ibadah aspect of it, that sort of ritualistic ibadah, that we don't realize that just being there for each other in times of need is an ibadah, and it's a huge ibadah in itself. So I think that was a really powerful lesson. The other thing that you mentioned was, this concept of not knowing what's going to happen. I think for most of us, we want to be in control, and we want to know the next step and the next step, and we want to plan our lives. And this is such a huge awakening to the fact that we really aren't in control, and that God is in control, and sort of allowing ourselves to take a step back and say, you know what, I really don't have any control. Did that sort of realization come into your mind at all, in like, you really aren't in control no matter how much you want to try to be in control?
That was a huge part of my realization. I had about 9 months to process Nuria's diagnosis. Well, not 9 months, maybe about 6 months to process the diagnosis and the heart condition. And I just kept telling myself, oh, there's something I've done, and I got to do something. I got to do something. I got to do something. What am I going to do? Do you know what I mean? And there was a time I remember being at the hospital, and I think it was the first time, because we didn't know anything what was happening. It was an emergency. And, we just basically go from, I mean, first of all, we waited for about 2.5 weeks just to get a bed at Great Ormond Street. And I'm like, I can see my child withering away, and it's still not classed as an emergency. And, after when she's in the hospital and then waiting to get her surgical date, the waiting process is hugely trying. And I completely at one point broke down. I think I literally on my knees, and I think I mentioned to you when we spoke that, I felt like I was on the ground. Literally, there was nothing else. It was just like, that was God breaking me down completely. And then once I submitted to that fact that I am like so insignificant, there is zero that is in my control. I could feel him building me back up. I genuinely, and I've said this to my family, I could feel him building me back up and saying that, well, like, I hope you've learned your lesson. Like, it's all me, hun, it's not you who's in control. And when I submitted to it, we always say, like, oh, put it in God's hands. And we say this a lot, but actually doing it, not only was it hugely scary, but once I actually did it, it was so cathartic, because I literally only had to worry about doing what he's asked me to do, which is basically like, trying to get in all of my wajibat, trying to visit my child and care for her in the best way that I could. And yes, we think about worst case scenario, and I think that's the main thing is we want to avoid that worst case scenario. We want to do everything in our power as a parent, not only as a parent, but as a human being. You know, you see someone struggling, you want to help them as much as you can. And I think I also had to stop thinking worst case scenario, and I had to trust that God wasn't going to let things get to worst case scenario. You know, like I had to believe it. I had to believe it to attract that positivity because I couldn't pull it from anywhere. Like my cup was empty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
No, I think, like you're saying, I think a lot of us do say we've left it to God, but
yeah.
but we really haven't. It's like that anxiousness, that worry that we feel, that constant sort of wanting to be in control. That's not leaving it to God. And I think it's like you're saying, once you submit, it takes off so much of the pressure. It
Huge.
actually then allows you to focus your energy on what's important, and that was your child. And for us, it may be something else, but it's actually just focusing on what's important rather than focusing on what may be, which
Yeah.
may never actually happen. And even what we think of as the worst case scenario may actually not be the worst case scenario, because again, we don't have the wisdom or the vision to see what's good for us and what's
It's like
not.
when they say human beings only use 10% of their brain. Like literally, we only see 10% of the plan. You know,
Yeah.
if that. And like there are things that come out of the woodwork, and this isn't just relevant to things like having a pregnancy. This is all over important lesson. And yeah, it definitely having that point of like that breaking point. And even when we went in for the second surgery, I thought, okay, well, everything's fine this time around. It's an elective procedure. I mean, I don't know. When I think about it, I'm like, how can I've studied this stuff. Like, I used to work in the operating theaters. You know that any procedure. So I was like telling this outside. You know that any procedure is never elective. Yeah, even if it is elective, there is always something that can go wrong, because at the end of the day, it's not us who decides the stuff. Even doctors, like we can raise the status how we want. Surgeons, they're like they walk around like gods, but in the end, it's it's only him. And even we were in for her elective surgery, and that lasted 3 weeks in one hospital and 3 weeks in another, completely
Wow.
unexpected. And it just goes to show you that I mean, something like what she got was dehydration. How would we ever have foreseen something like that? So yeah, definitely the concept of control, we
I
have.
think it's really, really important. I think we focus on the wrong things, because obviously, because we live in the physical world, and all we can see is, like you're saying, that the limited vision that we have, and the limited knowledge that we have, we focus on the wrong things. And it's like we'll look at other people and we'll think, oh my God, they're so concerned about money, or they're so concerned on the material things. But even being concerned about our health, or being concerned about our children, all of these things are very much for this world. And it's recognizing that whatever God does is not just for this world, but for the hereafter. And if we submit, then not only do we get the hereafter, but this world as well. Like you're saying with Nuri, you when you held her, it's like that concept of what was the big deal. It's
Yeah,
like so
exactly.
it's amazing, but it's like all that what if scenarios that people keep putting into our minds, and we put into our own minds as well. It's like when we have I don't know, if we're not feeling well and we go for blood tests, or some sort of tests and things, is we play out a whole movie in our minds of
I
what
mean,
if.
I'm pretty sure I slept on my arm a couple of nights ago, and my elbow has been killing me for like 2 days. And I keep thinking, do I have like tennis elbow or something? But I know in my heart of hearts, I probably just slept funny on it. But yes, even, yeah, like it makes you neurotic, doesn't it? I think might also be like a women thing, like we like to have control, and know what's happening. And this puts us in that gray area, which I'm not a fan of, definitely.
But it's beautiful. I think one of the things that I've actually learned from interviewing amazing women like yourself is how, when you do submit, everything sort of just works out so amazingly, and then it sort of, again, builds your relationship with God, and focuses you, and sort of makes you a much better person. It's amazing, the strength and the sabr, and the strength that you guys have. It's
I feel like at this juncture, Maswanti, it's very important to say that that's the rosy side of things. And there, I mean, if whether you're expecting just your first baby, second baby, or whether you're having a high risk pregnancy, or maybe you don't even know, Um, those dark times, I think, in order to get to the hopeful and the shukr and the sabr side, you have to go through the dark times. And don't kid yourself, other people are going through other things that are equally dark as well, sometimes more so. And I think it's so important. I mean, this is why we have this real talk, isn't it? It's
Mm.
so people know, like, it's not going to come easily. I mean, it took me probably the better part of the first year, maybe year and something, to get to a stage. I mean, even for my husband, like, I never even paid attention to him during my pregnancy, but I realized afterwards that he was only then processing, because as the mother who's bearing the child, she's in me for 9 months, so I'm living with her every day to day. I don't forget about her. But it wasn't until she was born where, like, she's real and visible, and her father sees her, and that's when it all starts to register for him. And
Mm.
so, even as mothers, like, there are some fathers out there who are equally in tuned to their children and to their wives, and he was very much that, or is very much that dad. And it was, I think I could see, in him, it took a few months to even just feel like he was capable, like, he could look after this child in the same way that he looked after his other children.
Mm.
And now, I mean, now when you see them, they're like thick as thieves. And he's working from home for the last year because of COVID. But the other kids, he's like, let them go to school, but I want Nuria to be home with me. So even on the days when grandma's like, I want to have Nuri, he's like, no, I want to have Nuri, So, like, they have their own special father-daughter bond that, I did kind of worry at the beginning, and, like, how do I do something to create that or to facilitate that? And I had to just let it go and let it take its own course.
I think, like you're saying, yeah, it doesn't just happen overnight. And of course, you have to go through the downs to come up to get to appreciate the ups and appreciate, you have, it's a journey. It's not suddenly you're going to be all okay with it and everything. But I think what what I've got from most of you guys, from your amazing stories is like, once you're in the down, you don't stay in the down. You
No.
actually pick yourselves up very quickly, and you sort of realize and focus on the positives. And I think someone's just mentioned on the chat, which on the comments page, about a charity that you started, and because again there was something that you came across which really affected you, and instead of focusing on the negatives, which is what a lot of people tend to do, you actually took that negative and made it very much a positive thing by starting this charity. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yes. And before I do that, I just want to say that I did very much focus on the negatives. A long time. So, and that is me. I'm constantly like, I mean, my husband, I drive him up the wall. He's like, you're never happy. The moment you do one thing, 5 minutes later, you want to do something else, or, like, glass is always half empty. Like, try and see the positive side. And definitely, I think that, like, Nuria was my life lesson, because now the exact same things that, like, my husband or my son would say to me, like, I'm now saying to them. Yeah, there was a point, that I was in the hospital on Mother's Day, and it's Mother's Day, and I'm there on my own, and I'm so angry, like, nobody's telling me what's happening to my child, and why has nobody even brought me any Mother's Day flowers, and all my friends are texting me, asking me about my baby, but nobody's asking me how I am, and like, arg. And and that, I think it was Mother's Day is usually Sunday, right? So it was like Sunday morning. I think I'd gone to see Nuria, and I was waiting for Munir to come into Central. And I got back to the, they give you like an apartment when your kid is staying in ICU. They give you a flat near the hospital. And so I go back to the flat, and I see this little, like, one of those, like, tin metal cans, with the labels kind of torn off, but it's been, cleaned up. And then it's been potted, and there's a plant, a flowering plant in there. And the sticker on the can said Floral Angels. And I thought, immediately, like, it brought a tear to my eye, because it said, like, Happy Mother's Day. It wasn't even addressed to me. It was just, generic for any parents who were staying in the place. And immediately brought a tear to my eye. And, as I was looking around like the communal kitchen and stuff, I saw a couple more and I thought, what is this all about? And, me, well, maybe you know me, but if I see something, like, I'll immediately Google it, like, where does it come from? How do I find out more about it? And I did that. And I found out that it was a company in Covent Garden that, a floral company that then they would take the flowers and repurpose them because, flowers will go bad in a couple of days. So they would repurpose them into these charitable giving bouquets, and Floral Angels would distribute them. And I thought that was, I was like, I felt like they were the people who remembered me. And I wanted to do something like that when I got home from the hospital. So when I got home from the hospital, that's when I looked them up, and immediately I said to myself, I want to do something like this. I want to remember the forgotten people, and I put together this little organization with the help of some friends called Care Packs. One of my friends, Fatima Molijina, she designed our logo as like a pro bono thing. I was like, Fatima, you're my friend. I need a logo. I want to do this. And my other friend, Fatima Mamdani, she's a doctor. She helped me to put together some other things that we needed. And basically, I did like a Facebook fundraiser. All of my friends donated some money. And before I knew it, we would raise like 800 pounds. And it was within like a day or two. And basically, I used this like startup seed money as, my startup money to put together these packages, these care packages, to send out to people that either I had met in the course of my journey that I thought, could do with a smile on their face. And also then started taking requests from others to do the same. So, let's say you knew someone who was a breast cancer survivor and you thought, they could do with a little smile on their face. That's where I would say to you, right, this is what I'm going to put together. And they were kind of like standardized packages for the most part. I even had people donate items. So Fatima Mdani, she donated these essential oils. Ayman Poptani donated macarons and little goodies. And I said, I want to send this out to people that will that it will bring a smile to the face, even for a minute, And I designed a gold bangle because every woman loves jewelry and chocolate. And I even had Alia from is it Al Akhlaq? Yeah. Al Khalik Designs. She has this Duas for My Child book. And I found that book to be hugely helpful, not just during my pregnancy, but in my hospital stays. And so I asked her if I could have some of those, and we handed them, out to the people that, I was sending these packages out to, a little book on like, prayers and sayings and self-care, things like that. Some face spray to keep you hydrated, some lavender to help you sleep. And it was a good way to channel that, that energy and turn it into a positive thing, because I knew that there had to be at least 10 other women out there who felt the same way I did, at least in London. Whether you're caring for a sick child, whether you're a parent of a sick child, whether you yourself are going through a hospital stay. And it went global quite quickly, which was great because nowadays, like, you're not limited to where you are. And it touched a lot of people, people that I know. I have classmates from university, a couple of them who had one of them has a kid with Down syndrome, lives in the States. Another one has a child who is basically, stays in a wheelchair all the time, is nonverbal, has a tracheal tube. And just watching them, like, you're just like, what makes them tick? And so I wanted to give back a little bit to these parents who have, in a way, like, are dedicating all of their time to looking after their special needs child.
I think that's so beautiful. I think, like I said, it's like, if you think about it, you still had 3 kids, one a special needs child who needed a lot of attention, who'd just been through surgery as well, so obviously needed more attention at that time. You could have actually gone on a total sort of downer, and like you started really feeling sorry for yourself, and that concept, wallowing in our own self-pity, which we tend to do. Why me? And it's not fair, and no one cares about me. And yes, okay, fine, I'm doing so much, but no one's noticing that. And all of these negative thoughts. But what you did with that was amazing. And not only did you, you used all of that energy and actually sort of made something amazing come out of it, which not only helped others, but obviously must have helped you as well, because the du'as that you must have got from these people would have had a huge impact on you and your family. So that's amazing.
Definitely. There was something that you just mentioned. Sorry, I'm trying to think of what it was. But yeah, I definitely think that, wallowing and having those down times, in that time, I found it, I needed to have support. And so I think one of the other things that is really crucial is don't hold stuff in. If you're going through a hard time, find your closest confidant. Sometimes maybe it shouldn't be your partner or your immediate family. Maybe it should be your best friend, someone who is a little bit removed from the situation, but gets you and understands where you're coming from, so that, you can get those things off your chest. And I find once you do, I mean, at least for me, once I do that, then I'm able to move on. But when everything's kind of in my head, and I haven't had a chance to vocalize it. And this is the other thing, as a community, sometimes we shudder to think thoughts that are, difficult or challenging, because we don't know how to deal with them. But it's not, again, it's not for us to deal with, and even Allah says, like, if you want something, ask me for it. Like, I want to hear you ask me for it, right? So if we don't verbalize our thoughts and actually say to God, "Oh, I don't want this to happen," like, please, Ya Allah, don't make this happen. Like, literally just talk to God. He just wants to hear you talk to him. He's not gonna overburden you. And I think one of the other things that I don't think I mentioned this to you when we spoke, but it was never a case of I was angry with God. I expected to get angry at God fully, for putting me in the situation. Why has he given me a special needs baby? And I think I used to ask why, like, what did I do? But even though I fully expected to get angry and say, Ya Allah, why? Like, I'm angry. I never did. I never got angry at God. It's I fully expected to, and I never did. I also fully expected to, maybe, when the baby's born, sometimes you hear about women who reject their own children. And I was actually scared, because your hormones can run amok. And I was actually scared that that could be something that could happen. But thankfully, when she was born, instead of, it could have gone one of two ways. It could have either gone, the opposite end of the spectrum, where I was completely, like, this isn't my kid. Or it could have gone on the other end, which it did, thankfully, which was, oh my God, you're so precious. Like, can I just eat you,
I don't think it's random. I think, God gives us the tools to be able to handle it. Like he says, he doesn't test us with more than we can handle. So he gives us the tools. It's a matter of us using those tools that he gives us. And sometimes we don't use them, and we try to manage without. And that's when then things go terribly wrong. I think, again, something that you told me when we were talking, which I thought was so beautiful. And I've said it to my husband and my children and everyone. And I just think it's such a beautiful statement that you made. And I don't even think you remember making that statement, but it's really hit home to me. So I'm just going to share it. You said that God must have seen something in me to give me this special child.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that is such a beautiful way of looking at it. The fact that you think, the fact that you're actually saying that God has seen something in you, something that's allowed him to give you a special child. He sees you as special to give you a special child. And I was just like, such a beautiful way of looking at it.
I couldn't have come to that conclusion on my own, though. And I think that was really crucial. I mean, I had my friend who is a GP, but, happens to be Shia Ithnashri, my closest friend, Farah, who basically, knows my ugliest side. And these people really, my friends, basically, where I felt sometimes I couldn't even communicate these things to my family, because your family are already worried for you.
Yeah.
Your family already, I mean, your husband's going through the same thing, really. He just might not say it. And it was my friends who, kind of the handful of people that I actually chose to trust with this news during my pregnancy. they were the ones who, made me realize. I mean, the reason I titled this My Ticket to Jannah, they made me realize that actually, like, you've done something here because he's chosen you to give you the special kid. They completely changed my perspective. I remember going down, to Wessex Jamaat when Auntie Sherbanu passed away. I think it was Jaffer, right? Her last name. This was this was around March or April of 2019, last year. Uh, we had actually missed my husband's cousin's wedding in Wessex, and a week later, this auntie of mine, who basically is a longtime family friend from Los Angeles, um, she passed away. And I said to my husband, "Look, I need to go down for this funeral. I just have to." Luckily we had reached back home, and so I drove down to Wessex, and I remember seeing, my childhood a friend from the Jamaat slash babysitter, because she was older, Nazneen, and I said, her mom says to her, "Oh, Sajeda had a baby. She's got Down syndrome," and the first day she goes to me, "Oh, you're so lucky." And like, it truly brought a tear to my eye. And it's a shame that more people don't have that outlook. And I think one of the other things that my closest friends said to me is like, "You're the kind of person who, maybe the reason you got this baby is because, like, God knows how vocal you are, and that you would never allow her to be marginalized. You would always like fight for her." And
Beautiful.
I thought, well, yeah, wouldn't anybody? But they said, no, not everybody.
Everyone's got that strength.
And yeah, I don't have never-ending strength. It comes and goes, but I definitely think that, for the most part, you have to allow yourself that time to grieve what could have been or what you expected to be, right? I expected to have a normal, typical child, and I didn't. And I grieved about that. I was sad about that. And I had to go through that grieving process to get to the other side. It's, okay, well, now I don't have it. Now what am I going to do?
So I think that's really important.
Confidence, but now, let's keep the wheels turning.
Yeah, I think that's what's really important. It's not just getting, obviously you have to go through the process, but not getting stuck in the grieving process, but actually sort of moving on and saying, okay.
But that process allowed me to find my own strength, because at the end of the day, no one can do it for me. I had to, I had to find my own strength. My husband had to find his own strength. My mother-in-law, who, I mean, she even said to me, she's like, I didn't expect that I would be able to care for Nuri. And like now, I mean, I'll be honest, like, she's our easiest kid, like the other two are proper high maintenance, whereas she's like, she's the happy kid and she's the baby of the family. And it's like having a little pet in the house when you got a baby who's, like her, just babbles all day long, and she just brought us closer as a family, and she made us really, truly, genuinely love each other, and made us happy in a happiness that we otherwise wouldn't have foreseen. Again, that's not something that we could see,
Yeah. So there's a lot of positives that come out of any life situation, right? So I suppose that the learning here would be that whatever life situation you find yourself in, you need to process it. You can't just be totally okay with it, but it's about actually processing it and not getting stuck in the negatives of it, and not thinking about the what ifs constantly, but sort of realizing, okay, it didn't happen, but there's a reason it didn't happen. And now let's look at what God's trying to teach me, or what are the positives that I can take out of this. And like I said, it's about sort of allowing yourself time to actually get there, but also using what the tools that God's given you. So I mean, one of the things that you said is talk to God, but then sometimes obviously we need to talk to human beings as well. So talking to your friends, or sometimes it may be a professional that you need to talk to, but actually finding someone to offload to, because again, if it stays within us, then it just goes round and round and round and gets bigger and bigger and bigger with inside us.
The other thing, Maria kind of made me focus on myself. And, I was, it wasn't just having another baby. And, we become sort of these sacrificial lambs when we become moms. It's like everything we do is for our children, constantly running around for our children. And I feel now, even though I'm still very much that person where they come first, if I do feel like something's not right with myself, I will take the time, to call up my doctor, to call up a friend, to go to my pharmacy, to whatever it is. If I need to, go for a massage, like I feel like I need that, and I'm like, you know what, I need that, and that self care, that we all love to talk about, or even just if I need, half a day to myself to go. Well, I say shopping, although there's no shops open, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And if I just need to like go for a walk around the mall and just have alone time or whatever, I've I think she's taught me that I do enough as a parent. It's okay for me to have a little bit of time for myself, and especially with Maria, like we went through a whole year where she was feeding via an NG tube in her nose. I got the nurses to train me. Eventually, they trained my husband, and eventually they trained Dadi, and we all kind of had this collective ideal that we need to do the things that we need to do, so that on the day that I need respite or Munir needs respite or grandma needs respite, like we just take that time. There's no awards won for being a martyr or
Yeah.
just running on fumes, right? You have to also look out for yourself because you're no good to anybody if your batteries aren't charged.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think one of the things that we learned from last week and also from yourself is actually taking the help that's there, and not, not feeling so egotistic or so proud that, I can do it on my own, because again, that help is there given to us by God. And it's like, why wouldn't you let other people earn the closeness to God through helping you?
Absolutely.
It's so powerful.
One of my friends said to me, because it was a couple of friends who would just call up and say, oh, I'm coming to drop off some food, or they'd come out with like presents and things like that for the other kids. And I can't remember who it was that said this to me, but they said, thank you for the opportunity to do this, because this is us building our akhirah, and up until that point, I always kind of felt bad, like I don't want to put anybody out. But no, I mean, you pay it forward, right? So when somebody does for you, you do for somebody else, and that's what keeps the world moving. And I think, yeah, you're very right. That's an opportunity for all of us to not only start working on our journey to Jannah, as it were, inshallah, but also to realize that we have to take some time for ourselves every now and again. It's crucial.
Yeah. We're coming to the end of the show. Before we finish, do you have any sort of advice that you'd like to give to the listeners? I mean, obviously, not everyone has been through what you've been through. So, but obviously, what you've learned through going through what you've been through is huge. So maybe some lessons which would help others who find themselves in any kind of life situation.
Yeah, I think that there are always going to be, in terms of special needs children, there's always going to be children who are born who are atypical, but it's so common that, like, I don't know, as I feel like, okay, if I was to say to the overall community, basically, rather than just somebody who was expecting, I would say as a community, let's hold off on the judgment and the looks, and rather, just, I mean, every kid is beautiful. Like when I see like other kids now who are, whether they have special needs, whether they're developmental child, whether they're handicapped, disabled, I mean, I can't help but see their beauty now. Yeah. I had to go through that maybe. I mean, I never had a problem, never had an issue, never judged, hopefully, but it really opened my eyes to see that not only are these children beautiful, but look at the people who are raising them. Look at the parents who are raising them. Sometimes it's not even parents. Sometimes it's like foster parents and carers who are raising these children. They're technically not even theirs. And what a marvelous thing. I mean, maybe they don't even believe you. Maybe they're not even Muslim, whatever they're doing, like we say, like, and not we say, but in the Quran it says, like, for every atom of good there is reward, and every atom of evil there's punishment. Every atom of good, that atom of good isn't reserved just for us. That goodness is for anybody who takes it on. And you look at them and you marvel. And so as a community, I think we should say to ourselves, um, you know, this is common. Having a child who is atypical or, might be handicapped, special needs, this is common. Yeah. What we need to do as a community, I think, is just normalize that to the point where, like, we remember that every child is different and essentially every child is the same. So every kid, between my son and my daughter, again, alhamdulillah, they came with no special needs, but they are two different people, right? And we have to remember that each child that is born is not only beautiful, but is their own, has got their own personality and their own needs. And so just remember to treat each child as an individual when it comes to the community. When it comes to parents who are experiencing...
Sorry, before you go into that, can I just ask, you said not to be judgmental. What did you mean by that? Because I think that's quite a powerful statement. Just need to understand it a little bit better.
Yeah, I think, there's some people who sometimes they're judgmental, sometimes they're a bit nosy. They just kind of want to know what the deal is. And then, I'll get this question like, oh, is she better now? Like, is your daughter better now? Well, I mean, her heart's fixed. I don't know what better now means, like, I mean, is your child better now? Like, like, it's a journey. They're going to have a whole life, so maybe we should be a bit cognizant of what we're saying to people. And rather just coming out with what we think is the right, it's more an exercise in listening rather than talking, I think. It's quite crucial to just allow someone to tell you. I've had people just kind of had doorway conversations with me. Oh, it's not like, how are you? Yeah. Is your daughter? Oh, she's okay? No, she's better now. Okay, bye. That didn't really help either one of us today. Like, it's like when people put out content, like put out meaningful content, have a meaningful conversation, or just say, like, Boaz with you. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents on that.
No, that's fair enough. I think one of the other things that has come across quite a bit is where people tend to think that it must be something you've done and that's why it's happening to you.
Yeah.
So again, that sort of judgmentalship where you're making assumptions.
If you think it's something that I did, then I guarantee you I've had that thought at least a dozen times more than you've had it. And I've had a geneticist and an OBGYN and God knows how many other people say to me, it's not you, it's your chromosomes, they get sticky. Literally, I've been told it's wonky chromosomes, yeah? Even scientists don't have an explanation. It's wonky chromosomes. It's literally, there is no knowing how it happens. It just happens.
And again, it's God's in control, right? And God isn't he's not petty like us. He doesn't sit there and say...
What better way to show us that even when a geneticist who's got like 3 degrees and is so factually, accurate says to me, well, sometimes in pregnancy you get wonky chromosomes. I was like, you're a geneticist and you're telling me wonky chromosomes? Is that the technical term, wonky chromosomes?
Brilliant. Okay, and also the thing that you said was not to be nosy. I think that's really important. I think that's come up quite a bit. Be caring, but not being nosy. There's a huge difference. It's like we don't need to know the ins and outs of everything.
If you know me and if you know my kids, like, that we laugh at Nuria because she's so funny, right? Enjoy what she brings to the table. Her comedy and sense of humor. The fact that she's like, she can like bend like Gumby, she's so like jelly, like just enjoy those things about her because she brings her own set of characteristics,
uniqueness, right? Yeah, her uniqueness.
And enjoy that of any child, and I think it's very important to remember that even when you're having a high risk pregnancy, all the odds are against you and you're down in the dumps, at the end of the day, you're having a baby. Don't forget that. That is a huge rahmah.
So I suppose looking at the positives in everything, whether it's yourself or whether it's someone else going through it, actually looking at the positives and the uniqueness of that creation of God.
Definitely. And don't Google stuff. That is the first thing to do. Don't Google stuff and don't let the people who might seem to be all doom and gloom. I had to advocate for myself at a certain point where I said to my doctors and going into appointments, when they would ask me this question, okay, so you've decided to continue with the pregnancy, and it would just keep coming, And finally, because I didn't want to get to 28 weeks and they were still asking me that question. And finally, I just say to them, all right, folks, at one point, there's like a team of 8 people, we go for these monthly visits, right? And he walked into the room. And, okay, Miss Panju. Okay. I said, okay, before we start, listen up, team. 8 of them there, like and consultants, whatever. I said, listen up, team. We're keeping this baby. It's happening. We know she has a heart defect. Let's move forward. And if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And I will ask you 1,000 questions. Just be prepared. And they kind of, after a while, they just kind of laughed and like, yep, no problem. Like, yes, ma'am. Good on you kind of thing. Because you have to advocate.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so being strong, confident, being positive. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave the viewers with?
Don't be afraid to have the dark times and the dark the difficult thoughts and conversations, and have them and come out of them, because the only way to get to the other end of something is literally to go through it. There are no shortcuts. You have to have those conversations, you have to have those thoughts, you have to voice them, and then you have to literally, like I said, God broke me down completely, like 0 out of 0, and then he raised me. And not only did he raise me, he raised our family, and he's made us into a genuinely like happy family. Like my friend who I said to you earlier, my really close confidant, she says this child was the missing piece of your family. It's very clear. We can see it. We've known you for however long, and we can definitely see that this child was the missing piece to your entire family.
Wow.
Relationships, like my husband and I, relationship is stronger. My mother-in-law and I, like, I am now her daughter, whereas before I was her daughter-in-law, simply because this child brought us so close together. It was
beautiful.
It was a grand design plan. There's no question about it, for sure.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So yeah, have those conversations, allow yourself to have those thoughts and have those conversations, but then move on. I suppose not constantly having the same conversations again and again and again and again, allowing yourself to be pulled down totally, sort of wallowing in your own self-pity, but allowing yourself to actually be broken in order for God to then build you up again.
And don't be afraid to disengage with those who might not be bringing you the relief or the fulfillment or the advice that you need. And if you can't find anyone else, call me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. You've been amazing. And thank you so much. No, thank you. Thank you for sharing and being so open about your story. It's such an eye-opener. And like I say every single week, people like me will sit on the minbar and will preach how to live Islam, but you guys are actually living it. You're walking the walk and talking. We just talk the talk sort of thing. So it's amazing. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So inspiring. Jazakallah khair. Inshallah, God accepts it from you. Keeps your family safe and healthy and getting closer and closer to each other and to God together, inshallah. Thank you. Please join us next week, same time at 7:30, where we're looking at a mother who is going to be talking about coping with losing a child to the drug epidemic. Very powerful topic, and she's going to be very open about it. And I think it's something that needs to be discussed, because it's not something that's not in our community. It is in our community, and we shy away from it. So please join us when Shanaz Bhai Jafar will be talking about losing a child to the drug epidemic. Thank you once again for joining us, and thank you again, Sajeda, for being so amazing and open with everything.
Thank you so much.
Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.